Okay, we are on page 6, section C, and we're looking at lower of cost and net realizable value. So, LCNRV is a standard that requires inventory in most cases must be valued at the lower of its cost and net realizable value. So, inventory is of course initially recorded at cost, and of course any other items to ship them and get them there, all that stuff that we learned on page 1 and 2, and then adjusted at period end. Net realizable value is the estimated selling price less the estimated costs to complete and sell. Okay, if you had to finish off the inventory and then sell it. LCNRV can be applied to groups of inventory or on an item-by-item basis. Grouping all products or all items in a certain region is not permissible. And the most conservative value will be comparison of cost and NRV on an item-by-item basis. Okay, so let's do an example. Information about inventory at EB Games at year-end. They use a perpetual inventory system. No adjustments have yet been made. So here's their games, and I'm sorry if they're out of, if they're not current anymore. No kids at home, no game platforms. It's kind of sad, actually. Well, we did get one of those 3D ones, and it's pretty cool, but I don't play any of those things. Okay, sorry, I'm clearly losing it. So here's the cost of each of these games in total. Here's the net realizable value. Again, estimated selling price less the estimated cost to complete and sell. We'll never ask you to calculate it. We'll just tell you. So you can either do LCNRV by the total or by the item. So let's look at cost and total them up. And you get 415,000. And this is now, just so you know. Then you look at net realizable value for each of these games, and you get 424,000. So, if we were doing LCNRV by total, you would merely take this total, and take the lowest. So, which is the lowest? 415. You don't care about individual items, you just care about the lowest. Does that make sense? So, that's by total. Now, to do it by item, you look at each one and take the lower of them. So, 80,000. They're both, so it just stays at 100. 40 lower. 72 is lower. And 92 is lower. Then you add them up, and you get 384,000. So, this is item by item, and this is the total. This is more conservative because you're taking the lowest of each of those. This just hides some of them, right? Some are significantly lower. Now, once you've calculated these, whether you're using by total or item by item, this is what it's sitting at now. If we're using by total, does it need to be written down to anything? No, because we write it down lower. So it needs to be written down. But does this one need to be written down if we're doing it by item by? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to write the inventory down to LCNRV by item. So this wouldn't need to be written down. Using the direct and indirect methods. So you can either adjust the inventory account directly, which is the direct method, or use an indirect method, which uses an allowance account. and both are acceptable. So, with the perpetual method adjusting for LCNRV, direct method no allowance, you put the amounts into cost of goods sold and adjust directly. So we're going to debit cost of goods sold and credit inventory. And the difference is, what number should I be subtracting? Where do we want it to be? We want it to be down here. Where is it right now? Right here. So we've got to write it down by the difference. So 415,000 minus 384,000 is 31,000. Now I just want to check one thing. You can also use a loss on inventory valuation account. Okay? It's also used. Check the wording in the question. On an exam, since that's hard to do, sometimes the wording on these questions gets so convoluted. Because of course in real life you'd understand what you were working with. You just look at last year's and go, what did they do last year when they adjusted? Oh, they used loss on inventory valuation. Well, so will I. I'll tell you if it's on in the instructions on the question. Okay. So that was the direct method. The key thing is you adjust inventory directly. You write inventory down. With the indirect method, or the account method, you put cost of goods sold or loss on inventory valuation. And the important thing is what you're going to credit is allowance on inventory to NRV. And this contra inventory account. That way you always leave the cost in the T account, but you have an allowance to balance it. So you take that 31,000 that we did on the last page and do that. So what it would end like on the balance sheet is you'd have inventory at 415, and you take less allowance, did give myself enough room, and you'd end up with 384, which is LCNRV by item. Okay? So this would always be at cost. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Just use an allowance account or don't. If I wasn't dealing with Connect, then I'd let you just use either one because they're both fine. Okay, the last thing I want to do is inventory turnover and days to sell inventory. So, inventory turnover is like accounts receivable turnover, cost of goods sold over average inventory. So that tells how many times it turns over. And so the units is times, and average days to sell is in number of days. So you've done these before in your calculations in intro, but let's just do one here. So we need to calculate inventory turnover and average days to sell inventory for each of those sets of years. Oh, not for 2019, sorry. Cut that offline. So first, inventory turnover is cost of goods sold. Oh, I don't see cost of goods here. This is where you kind of have to think and take everything you know. Sales minus cost of goods sold is gross margin or gross profit, whatever you call it. Right? So we have to take sales, 1.358 million minus the 485, and divide it by the average inventory. So we need inventory at the beginning of the year and the end of the year divided by 2. So 319,500 plus 301,400 divided by 2. Watch your brackets, you guys, because this has to be done first, then that. So it's 873,000 minus 3,104.50, 2.81 times. So that means your inventory goes from being purchased to sold 2.81 times during the year. So is this good if it was produce? Is it good or bad? Well, it's bad. If you 3 times during the year, that's every 4 months, your stuff's all going to rot. So that's poor performance. What if this is a plane, like a jet? Well, they take longer than 4 months to manufacture, so it would be good. Okay? Now, second thing is average days to sell inventory. 365 divided by inventory turnover, 2.81, 130 days. So it takes you on average 130 days to sell inventory. So again, you do the same thing. Produce, that's no good. Jet, good. Car, pretty good. So what do you compare to? Compare to last year, last year's, compare to industry, and ask why you have an odd result. Okay? For example, you guys, what happens this year to your average days to sell inventory? Do you think it's getting longer or shorter? I guess it depends what it is. If it's toilet paper, it's like negative. You can't keep it on the shelves. But most things is probably a little longer. Okay? So always ask these questions before you make a conclusion. Like, you couldn't just look at that and go, oh yeah, I think that looks pretty good for a jet. Yeah, okay, that's good. You're going to compare to last year's, to industry, and then ask why if it's abnormal. Okay? Okay, that is chapter 8. So yes, I think I talked too much, but hopefully it all made sense. Okay, we will see you in chapter 9.